It's a conscious choice to use. It's a conscious choice to have a mental health issue. It's their fault. Stop doing this behavior, right? And that is simply not correct. We now know that it's a brain disease. And like any disease, it needs to be treated. And if it's left untreated, it will just progressively get worse. I mean, it's like saying, well, somebody's got cancer. Well, it's your own fault. You shouldn't have smoked those cigarettes, right?
Behind the story.
Welcome back to another edition of Behind the Story. Today, my guest is Mark Astor, an attorney working at the intersection of law, addiction, severe mental illness, and family crisis. After seeing firsthand as a prosecutor how the system often reacts too late, Mark now helps families take lawful, compassionate action before tragedy strikes. Let's get into it. Mark, welcome.
Thank you for having me. So nice to meet you.
They're nice to meet you as well. I'm really interested in having a chat with you. I've never had somebody that went from being a prosecutor to going into to helping families and advocate for families. So I'm really curious about that. And a matter of fact, let's start there. What led you from being a prosecutor on that side to transitioning into advocating for families and helping?
So, let me back up a tiny bit, Jelani. So like you, I mean, we had this conversation off camera. We're both educated through the English system for the most part, although I did most of my, senior studying here in the United States. But I come from somewhat humble beginnings. My dad left school at 14, my mother 16. So in my family, me going to law school was a very big deal. And my father had said to me, because he was an entrepreneur, he built businesses. Some made money, some didn't. He said, if you become a licensed professional, like a lawyer or a doctor, you'll always make a living. My father was always concerned, right? I mean, because his business, the business he were in could be very much be dictated by the economic times, political times, right? And he had plenty of lean years and he never wanted to see me like that. So I think, once I got out of university, the idea of going to law school was a good idea. Now, I didn't realize at the time what I would practice, but I ended up going to work for the local prosecutor's office. I enjoyed being in the courtroom. But one of the things I noticed pretty quickly was that we were seeing the same faces over and over again. Even today, the mandate in Florida's criminal justice system is to punish first and rehabilitate second. Now, today we're a little bit more fortunate. We have certain what I call diversionary courts, meaning we have courts for people with mental health, we have people for drug issues, and we have veterans courts. And provided it's not a serious felony, the idea is you go through the program, you get treatment, and then they drop the charges. Great. Well, back in the 90s when I was prosecutor, we didn't have those. So if you came back often enough, which people did with behavioral health issues because they weren't getting any help, we just locked you up for as long as we possibly could, get you off the streets. And so I realized pretty quickly there was an issue with the criminal system. I was a prosecutor from 1994 to 1999. I did defense work for quite a few years. I made a lot more money. I must be honest, I was pretty miserable doing it. I didn't enjoy it nearly as much. And I think it wasn't about the money for me. It was about the satisfaction I got of representing, sometimes the victim of a violent crime, or even if it was a murder case, the family of a decedent, and getting them some closure. I took that responsibility very seriously, which is probably why after 5 years I was just burned out and done. But I lost the passion for practicing law after I did that. In 2004, and I know this is a bit of a diversion, but I didn't go right from the prosecutor's office to doing this. It took me a little while to get there. In 2004, I took a year off. I moved up to Washington, D.C. I went back to school. I have a master's in law. I worked on a presidential campaign for a year, but my candidate lost, so I had to come home. In 2010, I went off to California for 3 years and took what I had left after the 2008 crash, spent 3 years there doing things that single guys like to do. And I also studied for the California bar while I was out there twice and failed it twice. I had to come back. I came back around 2014 when I was ran out of money. And I studied. I took the bar exam the third time I studied for it actually here in Florida and out at the local library. I flew back, took the exam, got within a percentage point and still failed it. At that point, I said, well, what am I going to do? I was, 47 or 48 years of age and had really not much to show for my life, either personally or professionally. And then I met somebody that got me on this path that basically changed the course and direction of my entire life. So one morning I got invited to this breakfast. There was a guy there who was going to be presenting, and he had a company, still has a company, that teaches lawyers the business side of practice in law. And that is something they do not teach any lawyer or any law student at any law school anywhere in the country. I mean, they barely teach us enough law, to get through the bar exam, but they teach us nothing about the business side of running a law firm. And the guy's name is R. John Robbins. He's like the Tony Robbins of the legal profession. And I saw him speaking to a small group of about 20 lawyers one morning early, pre-breakfast. And I just, it completely resonated with me. And because I came from that entrepreneurial background, and long story short is I ended up begging the guy for a job, and he ended up hiring me after I begged enough, and he interviewed me a couple of times. But here's what I didn't realize, Jelani, when I went to work for them. Besides teaching lawyers all about business, at their very core, this company is a personal growth company for lawyers. And so they believe the financial growth must be preceded by personal growth. And while I was there for a year learning about running a law firm business, I learned two very important things. Number one, the reason I had been somewhat not so, that's not a fair word, been completely unsuccessful financially and personally was because I'd failed to take 100% responsibility for my life, right? Both the successes and the failures, because I had some success along the way. The other thing that I realized was if I was going to open up a law firm business, which I really wanted to do at that point, I'd have to find a bunch of people that really needed my help. And what I realized was I had some very close family members and friends who had these issues. And so in February of 2016, with no money, I sat down in that very same library that I'd studied for the third time with the California bar, and I opened up a law office. And I just started calling people, making coffee plans with people. I got really cheap business cards made at Vistaprint, and I ran around to treatment centers giving out my card. And I would go and speak to anybody that would listen to me. So in the meantime, because I had bills to pay, I took criminal cases. I took family law cases that I would co-counsel with a friend of mine from law school. I represented a student athlete here in Central Florida who got himself in all kinds of hot water with a female student. I took what I could to pay the bills. And 11 months in, I lost my dad. He unexpectedly passed. So I had to struggle to pay for his funeral. These were difficult times for me, but I never lost sight of what I was trying to do, of my goal. In 2017, I was able to get myself out of that library and I got a small office. And that's where I met my wife. And we didn't get married till about 2 years ago. That part of my life took a little longer to take responsibility for. And I put her through the ringer, trust me. But we built the business together. So really for the first 7 years, it was us doing everything, 8 days a week, 25 hours a day, meeting with clients, doing the sales, doing the marketing, drafting pleadings, running to court. We did it all. Only been the last 3 years where the business really took off like a rocket ship. And I can actually sit here and have a conversation with you without the phone ringing off the hook. So, and now we have a team, I think we're a team of 15 people. And during COVID, we went completely virtual and we went from really handling cases that were within driving distance to the office to handling cases all over the state of Florida. And so that's been my journey. It took a little while to get here though. I'm in my 32nd year of practice. Wow. And I feel like I'm just starting to hit my stride.
That's brilliant. It's funny, we have something else in common. Maybe there's something to do with the California bar because I did 1 year of law school and I took the baby bar in California and I didn't pass it either. And I've yet to retake it because I'm so jaded by the fact that no other states requires that crap for the state of California. So we've got that in common. I failed the baby bar on
Well,
my try.
I studied for the Florida bar for 3 weeks. I was working for the first month out of law school and going to class at night. I took 3 weeks off, crammed like crazy for 3 weeks and took it and passed it. And the California bar, I think all in all, I spent a year studying for. And I think the conclusion I came to was not that I was, not as smart as I thought I was, or maybe I wasn't, but maybe the universe was trying to tell me something. Because if I pass that exam, I end up staying in California. I don't meet this guy that changed my life. I don't meet my wife. And here's the irony. 2 years ago, my wife and I went back as clients of the company that I work for. Mm-hmm. We are now clients of that firm. They provide us outside C-suite services, and they completely changed the nature of our business. First year, we restructured. Last year, we were up 30%, and they helped us. So that's how life works, full circle. But if I don't meet him, I'm not sitting here. I don't even meet my wife. Think about that, right? I met him by pure luck. I got invited to a breakfast meeting that honestly, Jelani, I wasn't even going to go to. I wasn't going to go to because it was too early in the morning and I couldn't be bothered to get out of bed. But I had a nagging feeling I needed to go on a whim, and it completely changed the direction of my life.
That was your fork in the road, so to
It
speak.
was. And I listened to the universe. But listen, this business that we have that puts food on the table for me and my wife and the other members of our team, it does not happen by accident. I mean, it's taken massive action. I still work typically 6, if not 7 days a week. I mean, I'm not sitting, sitting here smoking a fat cigar while my staff work their rear ends off. I
Right.
work as hard, if not harder than them. I lead by example. I walk the walk and I talk the talk.
We'll get into talking about the business and further details in just a bit. But going back to your work as a prosecutor, what did you see working as a prosecutor that made you realize the system was not actually built to help people in crisis, as you mentioned?
Yeah, because we can't, even when I was prosecuting misdemeanors, which is county court, we kept seeing the same people coming back over and over again. And the reason for that was they weren't getting access to treatment. Now, obviously, if you have financial resource and you have health insurance, and it's really the same in the world I work in now, great, you can go and get yourself treatment. But if you don't have the ability to pay for treatment, or you don't have health insurance, which most of the people that we were seeing in the system didn't have because they didn't have private lawyers, they had the public defender. If you don't have those resources, I mean, what are you supposed to do? I mean, there's very limited options for you if you don't have that, the ability to go and get treatment, if you can't afford it. I mean, you can go to a county facility, but there's normally a very long wait list. And it's not because they don't care. It's because they're inundated and they simply don't have the resources to meet the demand that's put upon them, because a lot of people don't have the ability to pay for treatment anymore.
Right.
That was what we were seeing. And, in Florida, one of the things they passed some legislation when I was prosecuting, especially when I went to felony court and I was prosecuting these violent felony offenders. So they passed what's known as the punishment code. And it's called the punishment code for a very good reason. And the reason is that even as a first-time offender, if you commit a felony and you get convicted, the judge can give you the max right out of the gate on a first offense. And some of the times the judges did. They max people out, send them right to the state penitentiary. So Florida is very happy to lock people up who, if there's no other alternative. And in the 90s, there was no other alternative. It's gotten a little better today because we have these diversionary courts. But still, I mean, if you commit the crime here in Florida, you'll do the time. I mean, this is not a place to muck around. I mean, you see here, even, and I don't want to get political, but even with the immigration process, you know, they're working with DHS. You get caught here and you're not supposed to be here, you're gone. This is Florida. They don't muck around.
So tell me about your practice. How does a person become your client, and what are you usually looking at when you first interact with somebody that's going to be a client?
Yeah, so Florida is somewhat unique in this is a great place to do what we do. And there's two reasons for that, Jelani. One is we have great treatment here. So people should come here because we have really good treatment. And two, we operate here in my office, we operate under 3 different statutes that allow us to get a family varying degrees of control. In other words, our typical client is a family, usually mom and dad, who calls us from somewhere other than Florida. Very few of our clients are in Florida. They're as far west as Hawaii. They're as far north as, that New England corridor, Massachusetts, New York, that whole area. And it's typically because there's an adult child in the family with a long history of drug use and mental illness and treatment that doesn't work, if they'll even go. They're probably med non-compliant. They may well have been already involved in the criminal system or the mental health system. And so they're calling us to fix that. And we use 3 statutes here in Florida that allow us to get varying degrees of authority from a court. Anything as simple as getting an emergency order to basically pick somebody up off the streets and basically put them somewhere for 72 hours so we can get them assessed and stabilized, to sending somebody to treatment for the next 3 months. Or that plus, why don't we need access to their medical records? We want to control their finances. We want to restrict their ability to travel so they don't get on a plane and leave. We might want to decide where they live, who they spend time with, take away their driver's license, take away their right to vote. So there are varying degrees of control that we can get depending on what the family wants. But the underlying foundation of what we're doing is empowering families to make the decision that their loved one cannot make, because effectively their brain has been hijacked. That's what behavioral health diseases do. They hijack the brain. And so if the loved one, if the adult child cannot make the decision to go to treatment and be med compliant and follow up with an aftercare program, then who's going to make it for them? Because at some point, if the family doesn't, either something tragic happens, and that does happen, or the state steps in, either through the criminal system, because people with behavioral health issues make these silly decisions and get arrested, or Florida's mental health system. And actually, that happened to a family member of mine just 2 days after I buried my father. So I'm somewhat familiar with that. But Florida will lock somebody up in a mental health facility if things get bad enough. And that's why I tell families, you do not want the state taking care of your loved one, because the state doesn't do a very good job of it. I had one client of mine, he was in and out of federal prison. There's plenty of drugs in prison.
How difficult is that process in relation to the statutes? Because, adults have rights. They have
They
certain
do.
rights, right?
Yeah.
So how difficult is that? Like, for example, my mom and dad refers me to you, and I'm sitting in court saying, no, I'm fine. I don't need this. Like, how difficult it is to actually gain that control.
Well, I think it's easier in Florida, and it's probably easier in South Florida. I mean, there are different parts of the state that frankly handle the cases differently. There are certain parts of the state I might not file a particular type of case. But to your point, I mean, we're dealing with somebody as a general rule, and I'll sort of give you the 10,000-foot overview, Jelani, is where somebody, because we are establishing that there is a behavioral health issue, drug use, mental illness, right? They're not capable of making what we would consider objectively rational decisions about their own well-being, right? For instance, maybe they can't hold down a job, right? They're flunking out of school. They're sleeping all day. They're up all night. They're hanging out with completely different people they used to hang out with. They're aloof. They're no longer bathing. Their eating habits have changed. We have significant evidence of drug use. Okay. Maybe they've already been sucked into Florida's mental health system. They've been diagnosed with some type of mental health issues, some type of schizoaffective disorder, severe anxiety, severe depression, suicidal ideations. And here in Florida, we legalized marijuana, as did a lot of states. And now that's causing a mental health crisis. I mean, things of that nature. It may not be all of them, but it's about asking those difficult questions when the family comes to us. But truthfully, by the time they get to us, this has been going on for years. I mean, 5 years, 10 years, sometimes longer. And the family's just about done. And we're sort of the last port of call. They've read about us. I mean, I have a boatload of content out on social media. They've seen a video. And because I talk a lot, I like to talk about what we do.
Right.
And they're like, okay, maybe you can help us. But it's not a magic wand. It takes time to get somebody in recovery and keep them there.
From your perspective, what are some of the biggest myths that families are told about handling this crisis that probably keeps them stuck?
Well, that's a great question. A lot of the time when families call us, they're afraid. Okay. And there's two types of fear. The first type of fear, Jelani, is that nothing will work, right? Because they've tried treatment. It didn't work. Their loved one's been in and out of a half a dozen treatment centers. And for whatever reason, it didn't work. Maybe they even went down the legal path and it didn't work. Okay. And they're afraid if they spend more time, energy, and money and it doesn't work, they'll be like, well, see, I told you it doesn't work. Whatever, when they say it doesn't work, whatever that it is, right? Because treatment does work if it's the right facility and they stay long enough. And so does the legal part. That works too, if it's done correctly and it's enforced. So when they say it doesn't work, I get it, right? They're afraid. The other type is where they're afraid that it might work. What happens if it does work? And now this person is a completely different person. And we don't know how to deal with that. You see, when the family comes to us, Jelani, they are traumatized, even if they don't know it. See, they've been living in this chaos, for lack of a better word, for so long that that's their status quo. They don't know any different. I mean, it doesn't feel comfortable, but it's their norm. And, our subconscious mind is hardwired to protect us from danger. And the subconscious mind equates change with danger. So change is dangerous, which means it's frightening, which is why when somebody goes into treatment, it's really important that the family also does work too. And good facilities will provide a family program so that as their loved ones going through treatment, they can progress with them. Because otherwise, what happens is a year from now, their loved ones over here, and they're still down here living in the chaos. And now we have people living in a different universe, and they can't coexist, and they don't know how to deal with it, right? Because all of a sudden, this person whose brain was hijacked, all of a sudden, the shroud has been lifted, and they're like, "Wow, okay, what's going on over here?"
Right.
There's two types of fear, and we have to try to address that. So I'm not a clinician, but sometimes I have to play one, and families have to believe that things can change. But like I said, it's not a magic wand. It takes time. Recovery is a journey. It is not a destination, right? So I think the fear is the big piece in it. In terms of myths, because I know you asked that, and I'm sorry I got sidetracked just for a
That's all
second.
right.
I think, and this has gotten better over the years, but people still believe that if their loved one is dealing with an issue, that it's a conscious choice. It's a conscious choice to use. It's a conscious choice to have a mental health issue. It's their fault. Stop doing this behavior, right? And that is simply not correct. We now know that it's a brain disease. And like any disease, it needs to be treated. And if it's left untreated, it will just progressively get worse. I mean, it's like saying, well, somebody's got cancer. Well, it's your own fault. Shouldn't have smoked those cigarettes, right? We shouldn't have drank so much. And maybe that's a contributing factor, but we'd never, if somebody was to come home and say, like my aunt, unfortunately, my mom's sister died of lung cancer. We would never have said to her, this is your own fault. You smoked too many cigarettes, right? So
Right.
we would never do it with somebody who has a medical condition. So we shouldn't be doing it when someone has a behavioral health condition, because at the end of the day, it's just a disease, but it needs to be treated. And people have to acknowledge the fact that it's a disease and that it needs to be treated. And if your loved one cannot make the decision to save themselves, then the issue is, who's going to do it for them? Is the family going to step up and make that decision? That's up to them. I give them options. I don't tell them what to do. I tell them what the consequences are, because causes have effects and effects have consequences. Here's option one. You could do nothing. Here's the cause, here's the effect, and here's what's probably going to happen if you don't do anything. On the other hand, here's option two. We get them into treatment. I know that feels uncomfortable and you're afraid, which is why we're going to walk, hand in hand with you and cross every bridge. But here's the cause and effect, and here's the likely consequence if we follow the program, looking like we'll hopefully get a great result. But it takes time,
Thank you for explaining that, because I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of
I think we
thinking.
all are.
I think I'm guilty of thinking you're choosing to take it, but the point you're making that's really important is they are making the choice, but it's not a choice made in their right mind. It's a diseased mind that's actually making this choice. So the whole process is flawed. They're not making it as you and I would be making a choice where we're completely okay and we're choosing the negative behavior. They're not. They're
Yeah,
just
and
okay.
not only that, and it's interesting. There's been a lot of new research coming out, and I try to read this stuff all the time, Jelani. I just read an article just a couple of days ago. There is a very, very strong genetic correlation component to this, right? There are certain diseases where, if somebody in the family, say, had some kind of schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia, and I don't know if this is the one, but one of these mental health issues had something like a 76% correlation from, say, let's say the grandparent had it, now the adult child has it. There's, and it's the same with cancer, right? I mean, my family had heart disease and, cancer issues. And I watch that stuff like a hawk, because I know there's a genetic component and no one would ever dispute that. But when it comes to things like, schizophrenia, if you were to say, well, listen, part of the reason this person has schizophrenia is because their grandfather had it. People would say, you kidding me, right? No, I'm not. I'm deadly serious. And it's not just mental illness. It's substance use too. There's a very strong correlation between somebody in the family who may have been an alcoholic, and now it's been passed down, maybe from, parent to child or grandparent to child. There's no question about it. There's very strong evidence of that. So when we talk about the fact that it's a disease, it's passed down, and it can be passed down, and it is passed down. So we shouldn't discount that.
It's funny, you're confirming something that I believed anecdotally for years. I had no scientific proof, But I always said, to myself, if somebody is an alcoholic, somebody in their family had some addiction. Doesn't have to be alcoholic,
Right.
but it's some addiction, because I do believe addictive behavior is somehow genetic. I don't have the scientific proof about it, but I just believe it because I use myself and certain friends as comparisons to where, like, I don't have addictions to anything, but I see friends that they go from one addiction to the next. It's one positive, sometimes one negative, because they've got the underlying cause of it, in my opinion, which is the addictive trait. And you just confirmed that. I observed that over the years, and I thought, you know what? His father was an alcoholic. That's why he's addicted to doing this. He has an addictive trait within him. He just won't drink because he saw his dad drink, but his addiction is manifesting this way. So it's funny that you say that. Let me ask you this. You said that the statutes in Florida are helpful and makes it easy to do this, but where are they lacking? Because nothing's perfect, obviously, and you're in it. You're working in the industry. So where's it lacking? Where can it be better?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the questions we get when people call us, they say, "Well, my loved one's been in and out of treatment. Well, maybe they've been to treatment, but they walked out. I want you to lock them up." And I say, "I can't do that. Only the state can lock somebody up, right? We lock people up through the criminal system. We put them in jail or prison. We lock people up in the mental health system here in Florida, right? We have county hospitals and we have state hospitals, and the doors are locked and you cannot leave. That's because it's the state, even though it might be like a private prison, but it's a private facility that's locking you up. They're licensed as agents of the state. They can physically restrain you and prevent you from leaving. So I can't lock somebody up. What makes the laws that we use is their enforceability. And what I mean by that is, if somebody is ordered into treatment and they leave, I can go back to court and ask the court to sanction them. Now, one of the sanctions might be we send them to jail for a week or 2 weeks or a month, right? So a judge could lock you up for violating his or her court order. But as a general, I cannot put somebody into a locked facility. And at the end of the day, we are not dealing with somebody who's a criminal. They haven't done anything wrong. They have a disease. So are we going to now start locking people up for that? I mean, that's draconian. I mean, our
Right.
mental health system here is very broken here. As an aside, I file 250 cases every year to get people out of Florida's mental health system, because it happened to my family member and it became a bit of a passion and a mission of mine. You do not want your loved one getting stuck in Florida's mental health system. I mean, talk about one flew over the cuckoo's nest. I mean, that's what I mean. So I can't lock them up. That for some people is frustrating. They're like, what, well, they can walk out. Yes, they can, but there are consequences. Well, I don't want them going to jail. Okay, well, if we're going to have a court order and you're not going to let me enforce it, then this is probably not an option for you. Because the magic of this is the consequences for violating the court order and having the ability to go back and seek relief from the court, because it's a court order. So if we're not going to do that, well, fine, then maybe we need to talk about a different option, because it doesn't sound like the legal option it just works for you. And I had that in a case. After the fact, the client was like, "I'm not letting you enforce this." Her adult son, who'd been in and out of treatment for a marijuana disorder, she would not let me go back into court and enforce it. Okay, then there's nothing I can do for you. On the flip side, Jelani, we also rely on our judicial system to enforce things. I had one, judge that I was in front of 3 times. I won't mention his name because that's disrespectful. And I went back in 3 times because the individual that I was putting into treatment simply refused to comply with the requirements of the court order. And this, this one particular judge would not enforce the court order. And I said to family that, I've been back 3 times already. He's not going to enforce this thing for us. You know what happened? About a year later, I got a call. The guy overdosed and died.
Mm.
So, I mean, it just is what it is. It's not a perfect system. So I think that, that's probably the biggest issue we see. But most people are not going to risk going to jail. For every 10 people I put into treatment, maybe one walks out. I don't know. And just so you know, I have a private investigator on staff with a team of investigators. They walk out, we'll go find them. I'm pretty good at doing that stuff too. I've taken that into account. It's not perfect, right? I mean, it really isn't, but what's the alternative? Do nothing? We know what happens when you do nothing. It's either the state or they end up dead.
When a family comes to you and they say, "We've tried everything," what's your approach? Like, what's the first thing you look at?
Well, okay, again, I mean, it depends, Jelani, what that means. We've tried everything. Okay, well, and I mean, when a family comes to us, I mean, we have a whole a team of intake people, and their responsibility, to a large extent, is sort of triaging the case, is spending enough time with the family to find out, like, how long has this been going on for? What are the diagnoses? What have you tried? What has worked? Why did it work? What hasn't worked, and why didn't it work? Right? Because if
Right.
they're saying, well, he or she has been in and out of treatment, well, what does that mean? Because in my world, we're putting somebody into treatment, it's a 3 to 6 month process where they are in treatment, and then they work a continuum of care for another 6 months. Because we know if you can keep somebody in recovery for a year, great chance they are able to maintain recovery for the rest of their life. So if this person has been in and out of a dozen different treatment centers and never stayed long enough, a week, 2 weeks, maybe even 30 days, and then they left, and then we allowed them to leave, there was no consequences for that, then yeah, you could do that 100 times. It's probably not going to work. So there's that. Were they prescribed medications that they did not take? That could be a contributing factor. I mean, maybe they went down the legal pathway and didn't seek enforcement. I've seen people try this on them they go to the courthouse and somehow they muddle their way through the process, right? And then the person walks out. Oh, March night doesn't work. Guardianship doesn't work. Well, did you enforce it? Well, what do you mean did I enforce it? I mean, did you enforce the court order?
Yeah.
Well, how do I do that? Well, I mean, that's what you pay me for, right? So I can enforce it. And the other thing is, were they in a clinically appropriate setting? Because it's not just a matter of going to treatment for the right amount of time and being med compliant. You have to be, these days, somebody has to be in a facility that is clinically appropriate for them. I mean, 10 years ago, there was a million different treatment centers down here. 99% of them are gone. They got shut down. We had a federal grot down here, and they arrested all these people. Right. So you have to find a facility that really can handle this. And I'll tell you, I can only think of, there's only really 3 facilities that I think of as I sit here that I would send my own family member to, and I would, send your family member to. So the pickings are slim, but it's because based on the work that we do, I got to make sure we send someone to a facility that can really do the job here. So when someone says it doesn't work, I need to know what that means. Right? Because it's not just as simple as, well, it doesn't work. What's the it? Why didn't it work? There's a reason for that. And look, I'm a realist. I know that we can't save everybody, right? And that does happen when we lose somebody. But I'll tell you something, we can save a lot of people and we get great results. But you got to follow the program and you got to let us enforce the court order, and you have to let your loved one stay in treatment long enough and not accept the fact that they want to leave. Right? After 30 days, they're calling their family. I'm fine. They're calling us. He's been in 30 days. He's fine. Well, of course he's fine right now. He's in treatment. He's not using. And he's on his meds. He's stable. He says he's got it. Really? He's been sick for 10 years, been out of a dozen different treatment centers, had 2 overdoses. He's been arrested for DUI multiple times. And he's got it? No, he does not got it. But look, he's your son, your daughter. I'll do whatever you want. But causes have effects and effects have consequences. And my goal is to save this person so I can save your family. And when I was prosecutor and I was prosecuting violent felony offenders, I took that responsibility seriously. And I have the same attitude to this, right? I take my responsibility to save your family seriously. And that starts with having an honest conversation with you, coming from a place of love, but also being honest with the person and not telling them something that is not realistic. This is what it looks like. This is what recovery looks like. Is that a conversation that you want to have?
How does a family know that they're waiting too long before they take action?
Well, you're asking some great questions here. I don't know if there is a specific, this is the blueprint for you've waited too long. I think that once families know there's a problem, that's the time to intervene. And every set of circumstances is going to be a little different, right? You know what's interesting? Most of the time when it's a family calling us, it's typically the mother that calls first. Not always, but usually it's the mother that calls first. And the question that we'll ask, that I used to ask a lot when I didn't have any staff, was, how do you know there's a problem? And you know what the answer was? I
What's that?
just know, right? My mother, is still around. She's 83. If I'm on the phone with her, she knows if I had a bad day. It's instinctive, right?
Mhm.
And I see my own wife with my stepchildren. She knows, right? And I believe that the mothers have this magic power. They know when there's a problem, even if it's even subconsciously, they may know it. They feel it, right? They may not know exactly what it is, but they know there's a problem. And I tell families, okay, if you feel it, there's a good reason. Don't ignore that. So this is about asking them, right? What are you really seeing here? Have their, you know, are they unable to hold down a job? What about school? Are they flunking out? Did their grades suddenly crash? Have you seen evidence that they're actually using drugs? Because maybe you have. These days, marijuana is so ridiculously accessible in here in Florida. It's a joke. We're now having issues with kratom, which is another opioid-like substance you can buy at a gas station. We're having problems with nitrous oxide, which are these canisters the kids, inhale, right? There's another thing. I think it's called dusting, right? Where they buy these aerosol cans and they push the button and out comes whatever's in it. But it's like a laughing gas. I
Mhm.
mean, it's terrible. It's frying their brains. So, I mean, maybe there's evidence of that, but their behavior will certainly have changed. Okay. And once I think there's a problem, then you need to address it. It's about having a conversation, at least initially, with your loved one and saying, hey, what's going on here? Your grades have crashed. You've just lost you've lost 3 jobs in 3 months. Who are these people that you're hanging out with? By the way, you haven't taken a shower in a week. We
Mm.
never see you anymore. You're always glued to your phone, texting people. What's going on here? And I tell parents, be nosy about what's going on in your child's life. Be really nosy. It's okay. What's the worst they can say? Mind your own business. Okay, well, now there's probably something going on here. And so I think when they first realize that there's a problem, then maybe it's a time to sit down and have a conversation and talk about intervention. Doesn't mean you got to call me. I'm typically the last port of call, but something has to be done. And you need to figure out what that is. And maybe you need to seek, maybe some clinical help. I'm a big fan of doing interventions. I've got two absolutely world-class interventionists that, they're part of my team. They're not employees of mine, but one's a licensed clinical social worker and the other's a forensic psychologist. I mean, these are highly qualified, trained people. And maybe it's not ready yet for me, but maybe it's ready for them. And they can help a family sort of figure out what's really going on here. So don't
Mark,
wait because it only gets worse.
let me ask you, how is this era different? You mentioned a bunch of different things that people have access to. When you look back into the 90s when you were a prosecutor and what was available then and what's available now, how is it different? Even the public conversation around what people are doing, how is it different?
Well, I'll tell you what I think has changed. I think is the nature of the drugs. Now, we both grew up in the sort of British system, right? And I grew up in the United Kingdom in North London. I moved here when I was 21 and I'm 59 now. And I'll be honest with you, Jelani, when they talked about legalizing marijuana here, I didn't think it was going to be a big deal. Because I thought back to my days of when growing up in England and I was a kid, and my friends all smoked weed and I didn't think it was a big deal. And it
Right.
wasn't a big deal. Most of them went on to have very productive lives, right? Not today, right? We're seeing so much mental illness driven by the use of marijuana, right? And with all these sort of, and there's all these sort of, man-made drugs that you can get that don't even fit the definition of what an illegal substance is. So that
Mm.
it's not even illegal yet, right? And then the legislature changes things to make it look illegal, and they change something in the substance, and now it's no longer illegal. So just the actual nature of the drugs that are available are a problem. I think also, I mean, we've become addicted to these things, right? I mean, that's another thing. We're seeing kids now that are addicted to social media. They can't get off it. I mean, I go to dinner with my nieces. I got 5 of them. They're all on the phone, and I'm like, my parents are like, my in-laws or my wife's like, get off the phone. We're trying to have a conversation here. So we have all these different things that are coming along. You know, we have things like ADD and ADHD. I was talking to a clinician this morning. We have all these different things that are now being diagnosed that we didn't have back then. And I don't know necessarily why that is. Maybe we've just got a better diagnosing things, or maybe we're just coming up with different diagnoses that didn't exist before. Right. I know when I was a kid in school and didn't sit still for 2 minutes, and I went to a boys' private school, I got a rap on the knuckles. I soon paid attention. And I'm not advocating for hitting children. My point is, these days, what they do, they medicate the kid. I see so many families who have an adult child that very early on in that child's development, they gave the child some type of medication. A child's
Yeah,
brain is still forming until 25. If you
yeah.
give the child a medication that's like speed, what do you think's going to happen?
You alter it.
It alters their brain chemistry, and
Mhm.
then you spend years trying to figure that out. And again, I'm not telling parents what to do. I'm just telling you what I see. So things have changed, right? We have, again, we have things. We're putting all these things that are in our food that they're now saying can alter a child's mind, right?
Right.
So, I mean, our environment has changed. Our technology has changed. The drugs have changed. The way we respond to them has changed.
And
So, I
also,
mean, there's a lot of things here, Jelani, that have caused a problem.
it's also, I think, something to do with how people view parenting. My dad and my mom used to, and I have to be careful because I don't want people to think I'm criticizing parents. But my mom and my dad used to say they're not lazy parents. And what they meant was with parenting, you have to be a manager from the perspective of you're a micromanager. You can't just leave children to their own devices. At a certain age you can, but for example, my son is 13 and I know what it is when they're on the phone. You don't have to worry about them. You're thinking you don't have to worry about them. Let me rephrase that. So you're thinking I don't need to pay them any attention, they're on the phone. But when you tell them get off the phone, then you have to figure out how to occupy them. And that's what my mom and dad used to say. That's when you're a lazy parent. You just tell them to go watch TV or tell them to do something because now you don't have to be active. And it takes stamina because when I've told my son, okay, get off the phone, he said, okay, dad. And then he wants to talk to me for 3 hours. And I'm thinking, wow, this is what my dad meant when he said you can't be a lazy parent. You told him get off the phone. Well, now you have to have a conversation with him. He's going to ask you lots of questions. He wants to go here and do that. So I do empathize with some of the parents in that they don't have the time probably or the stamina. The mean people would say then they shouldn't be parents. I'm not going to say that. I'm just going to say they have to come up with creative ways and alternative ways of dealing with their children if they want them off the phones and off these things.
I think it's much harder to be a parent today. I do, because there's so much external pressure on the children, so many external influences, the child, that it's almost impossible for the parent to monitor everything, right? I mean, they could be,
It's
you know,
impossible.
we've just had two instances here in the US where I think it was at least one of them, maybe two of them, where a child was using Chat GPT as its mental health counselor, and the child committed suicide.
Mhm.
And the parents were in the dark. They didn't know. How could they know? Right. And I'm sure that these poor parents are rife with guilt and will be for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
But it's not their fault. It's not their fault. I mean, we've got a lawsuit going on in California where parents are suing various
The
social
social
media
media
platforms,
companies, yeah.
right, for getting their child addicted to social media. And I think on one instance, the child committed suicide. Again, so you have all these very different external influences that we didn't have when we were growing up. I mean, told me you were a soccer player. I mean, I didn't have time to get in trouble. If I wasn't in school, I was always playing soccer. I played soccer at school. I played soccer with other clubs. If I wasn't doing that, I was playing soccer with my friends. My mother was constantly cleaning my soccer equipment.
Yeah.
That was it. I mean, we didn't have the internet. I didn't have a cell phone. That was it. My life revolved around school, which I didn't really care for, and playing football. That was it. That's all I
Yeah.
cared about.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because when I think about when I grew up, if you think about a parent that grew up with the internet, they're going to be a different parent than a parent who grew up without the internet. So for me, I was on the cusp. I grew up started without it, but then I had it. So with my son, I always have something for him to do. I'm like, okay, go read. Okay, you're going to football. Okay, all right, you're going swimming. Okay, like I always have something to get him off of the social media, off of, being on the phone all the time. Because if I don't, he will I tested it. I said, let me spend a day and not do anything and see what he does. He literally stayed on his phone all day long. So then I realized, okay, it's my responsibility. He's a child. If I leave him alone, he's just going to just sit there with it. But when I have activities for him, he does engage in these activities. But I know most parents don't have time, and most parents are pulled with different things. So I don't want people to feel criticized because they're not able to be more hands-on. But I do get it. If you're not, your child is gonna be subjected to bullying and all the stuff online and the crazy things with Chat GPT if you're not able to be there.
We're living in a very different world, my friend. And,
Yes, we
the other
are.
thing is, listen, I try not to watch too much news. I'm probably a little guilty of it myself. But we literally have access to 24-hour news. Even the parents out there are being deluged with all of this information, right? And the internet's a beautiful thing. It's an amazing tool, but we have all of this stuff that's being thrown at us. There was a movie I saw with Tom Cruise where they had these they called them precogs. They could see the future, right? The pre-crime. It was called
Yeah.
pre-crime. And so
The
this one,
Minority Report. I think it was the
thank you,
Minority
Minority
Report.
Report. So somebody had tampered with his Minority Report, and he went and had his eyes changed. I mean, there was a scene where he swapped his eyes out, and he was walking through the mall, and all of a sudden, he hears this voice, "Hey, Mr. Yamaguchi, how you doing?" Right? And we're getting there to the point where wherever we go, we're not only being surveilled, right? But we're going to be inundated with all this information. How about a new car, Mr. Astor? How about a new pair of soccer boots, Jelani, right? You're just walking through the mall minding your own business.
Yeah.
So we are inundated with information, and it's all stimulating this.
Mark, what
So,
does real hope look like for families in these crises? What does hope actually look like for them?
well, I think once they make the commitment to of time, of energy, and resources, which they may well have already spent by the time they got to us, I think if you can make the commitment and you can work the program, and you appreciate the recovery. I always tell people recovery is a bit like the stock market. And if you've been watching the stock market lately, it has been going up and down like a yo-yo. It was down this morning and it was right back up like a rocket within a couple of hours. And that's what recovery is like. It's very up and down, right? The trajectory is upwards, as typically is the stock market if you stay in long enough. But that's what recovery is like. And especially at the beginning, your loved one will have good days and bad days. And at the beginning, maybe the bad days outweigh the good. But over time, that's going to change. Probably in
Right.
the next 90 to 180 days, that is going to change. But it does take time. And, I tell families, I'm selling you hope. But it starts with making the commitment, and then it continues with making, working the program, not just your loved one, but you too, you as a family. And if you work that program a year from now, everybody's lives are going to be significantly different. But it takes time, and you got to work the program. And it's not a quick fix. I don't have that. If I did, I promise if I had a wand, I'd wave it for everybody.
Absolutely.
So that's my story. I have hope. I sell hope.
Before I let you go, I've got a couple more questions. One,
Sure.
really relevant for families. How can a family tell if they're in denial or just simply uninformed? Like, what's the difference?
I think denial is a conscious choice to just say there's nothing wrong, even when the facts are glaringly in the face saying there's a problem. That to me is denial. And we see that a lot. It's interesting because sometimes I was talking to a family today, and their biggest concern was that other people in the community would find out about it. And I wasn't going to say anything because it just didn't feel right. But in my head, I'm saying, what's more important? Any stigma that you might suffer or saving this person? Because this
Right.
has been going on for a long time. That's denial, right? Deciding not to basically ignore it. That's denial.
If you could change one thing about how society responds to addiction, what would it be?
Well, I think the big thing that we need to do is that we need to make quality treatment available to everybody. because it's not available to everybody. With the families we work with, they either have to have the financial resources to pay for treatment or health insurance. Not everybody has that. I know there's been some talk online. I think the president issued an executive order. I know that Health and Human Services Secretary Robert, RFK Jr. apparently says we're going to put some, throw some money at this. I'm always nervous when the government tries to throw money at a problem, because as we've seen in the past, that's when, somebody figures out a way to steal it, whether it's the COVID money or the funds that we had in Minnesota where people were stealing it. Those are meant for people that need help.
Right.
It's not a get rich quick scheme. So I'm always nervous when the family says, oh, the government says, well, we can fix this. Okay, maybe you can. But I think if it's done right and we can regulate it and make sure that the right money gets into the right hands, then I think we have a chance to really make a big difference. But it's going to take time and it's going to take significant amount of money. But I do believe that in a country like America, right, that we can solve this problem. There's money there. We just have to have a bit of a will to spend it.
And before I let you go, Mark, if a family is listening that needs help, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, so they can find us online. Our main website is mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. That's mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. Or if they just Google my name, I've got about 850 videos sitting on YouTube and a lot of other content out there. You should be able to find me. I'm not hiding.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it there, Mark. Thank you so much for coming on Behind the Story and being so gracious with your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jelani. So nice to meet you.
Same here. If you like today's conversation, like, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Until next time.
Behind the story.